loud voice, so if you think me speaking through the microphone is too much, let me know and I'll put the microphone on the side. It's come from so many years of teaching, you have to project. So thank you very much to the Alexandria Caen Sister Committee for inviting me. It's a real honor for me to be here tonight, especially in a historic building. And I was trying to think, maybe it's probably the first or second time in my life I speak in a historic building, so I'm kind of intimidated. And Jenny and Tony for thinking of me to come and talk about a subject which is actually dear to my heart for many reasons. And so already I want to make sure that if there are any sensitive souls out there, please be sure that I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm just giving my humble, personal, female, opinionated opinion. So I'm glad to be here tonight, and thank you very much for braving the cold and coming. Hopefully I'm just the calm between two blizzards. And I do hope none of you got stuck last night on the road. I was one of those persons back during Carmageddon in February 2011 who had to abandon their car on the side of the road, and basically it took me 3 hours and 45 minutes to drive from the Alliance to the entrance of Bethesda, and I live further north in Bethesda, and so I just left my car on the side of the road and I walked back the last 3 miles. I arrived pretty tired and frozen. So yesterday when I got out of the class I was giving on Houellebecq Soumission, that very scandalous, controversial book, as some of you may know, and I saw the snow accumulated at 8:45 p.m., which they had said, oh, it's only flurries, and I'm going, no, it's not flurries. And I looked at Google Maps and I saw all the accidents and scarlet red road tracks leading to Bethesda. I said to myself, I've been to Chicago once, I'm not going to do it twice. And so I booked a hotel next door to the Alliance and I enjoyed a really nice sleep. So, and I'm a third Russian, okay, so if I decide not to walk in the snow, I think it's instinct coming back. But when I was doing that and when I was looking at the snow and thinking, I can't do that again, I was thinking of all of the other women out there who were in turn wondering when they would get home, if they even would get home, and worrying about their children, and who would be preparing them dinner, putting them in bed, supervising their homework. Because at times like this, that's kind of the question you ask yourself. You're there in the car, every 8 minutes you've got the excited weather forecast from WTOP telling you all about the gridlock, and you're there, saying like, it's 1 hour gone, 2 hours gone, 3 hours gone. And in 2011, some of us women spent 12 hours trying to get back home. 12 hours to children who maybe had fathers who were also stuck on the road, so they were left alone at home. So that's the kind of time that you start to ask yourself philosophical questions. And one of my friends yesterday told me she left Washington International School, where she teaches French, at 5:30 or 6 p.m. just about when it was starting, and she didn't get home until midnight, midnight, so she did spend 6.5 hours, and I thought, God, you really ask yourself, do you want to be a working mom or a stay-at-home mom at that time? But you may start not only at events like that, although those are the times really that struck a chord even more than usual. You can ask yourself this question very early in life, and sometimes when you ponder that question, you can only ponder that question if you can afford to ponder that question, whether you can afford to think, can I be a stay-at-home mom, or can I be a working mom, or can I be somebody who can afford to have a husband who's working and I am also working, or do I need to work? So those are the questions that lies and probably that explain the differences between the US and France, because when it comes to debating between being a woman working or family in France, there is not so much a debate. I mean, I've read, of course, like everybody else, I've read Lenin from Sheryl Sandberg, about the participation of women in the workplace, and I've of course read the famous article that became then a book by Anne-Marie Slaughter, and I must admit she's quite some woman. And I thought to myself, only in the United States will I be able to read an article like that. Now it's changing a little bit in France because of the, and not only in France, but in Europe, for instance, take Germany, West Germany. I'm saying West Germany because now it's unified, but the part of Western Germany, okay, where they kept that, even though it's Germany and everybody believes that, oh, they're so disciplined, they work so hard, they're successful so much. But when you look at the condition of women, they don't have any school until the child is 5. You know, and that was not the case, of course, in Eastern Germany, where they had daycare since the day the child was born. So when there was the reunification of Germany, that kind of let some of the women in Western Germany feeling like, hey, in Eastern Germany, the Eastern part, they still have all the benefits we don't have. Okay. So in France, in the last, and in Europe in the last 20 years, with the rise of a certain let's say, right-wing mentality, which considers that one of the way of suppressing unemployment would be to have women stay at home. You know, we have that starting, that debate that in the United States we've had for 3 years, or a couple of decades at least, or at least, let's say, since the Reagan era, you've had this debate about should women stay at home or work in terms of economics, and then in terms of personal choice as well. In France, I think we're just about starting. However, I won't bore you with a lot of numbers, but I thought that some of them might be interesting. So in France, a stay-at-home is a possibility offered to all women. Why is that? Because rarely a woman will choose in France to stay at home for all of her life. It happens, but only in the 1%er, and when I mean the 1%er, it's like the 1%er in the States, those who have enough income and who couldn't care less, you know, and don't need to work. In France, women work because they need to work, because with one income only, and even with a really healthy welfare state, a lot of allocation familiale, family, you know, and housing subsidies, sometimes it's not enough, okay? But in France, 51% of the active working population is women. There's more women working in France than there are men. Now that's an interesting number, right? And out of 100% working women, 84.2% of working women work between the age of 25 to 49. So it's a person of the population which actually is working and at the same time is of reproductive age, okay? And 54% are between the age of 50 and 64, which is my age group. And then the whopping 35% are between the age of 15 and 24. So basically, the working female population in France is between the age of 15 and 64. Now, after 65 years old, there's only 1% of women working. That is because we enjoy retirement, okay? For those of us who want. Now, those numbers, of course, are not for all women because they're relevant only for employed women, which means not somebody who's self-employed, but somebody who has an employer. Like somebody who is a doctor or a lawyer with what we call in France a profession libérale, that is different. They probably work later, you know, or they might retire earlier if they have income, and they certainly do not benefit of all the allocation familiale, etc., because you have to be an employee to have those. They don't have social security that will pay their maternity leave, for instance. I will talk about that later, but I have a number of sisters who are in this case because they are either lawyers or doctors, and so when they had their kids, they stopped because they wanted to take care of their kids, at least for the first couple of months, but they didn't receive any subsidies from the government like I received when I gave birth to my son, okay, for the first 3 months after he was born. So that are a few numbers then. So it means that we have what we call a social safety net, not a social media net, but a social safety net, the welfare system, which is what we say heavily subsidized by the state. In fact, it is heavily subsidized by the taxpayers because the tax rate in France is high. However, your tax rate comes back to you. You know, whatever you pay in tax in France comes back to the citizen, the one who needs the help. So that guarantees basically to a woman, it guarantees that you will be able to get back to your job after, or if you take some paid or even unpaid time off to raise your kid. For instance, you have what I call, I will mention that in an anecdote later on, the compulsory maternity leave, where you have to take some time off before you give birth and after you give birth, and depending on how many kids you have, this is a period of time that you can take off before or after kind of extend. And you can also, and these are paid, okay? And then there's also the unpaid leave that you can take for up to a certain number of years. Now, when I had my daughter, the unpaid leave I could take at the time when I left to come here in the United States when she was 28 days was 3 years, okay? Then, like a year after I left, that was extended to whenever she was reaching her 8th birthday. Okay, so you could be in France, not working, being guaranteed to find your job back after having stayed 8 years without being working. And this is kind of a privilege in a way, Now, and especially, I mean, in my case, I was a civil servant because I still belong officially to the Education Nationale. And so I still every year have to file this thing that I am taking this unpaid leave of sorts, because obviously now I can't really say that my daughter is 8 years old or under 8 anymore. But there is this other possibility, which is you follow your spouse. You follow your spouse is named, in some countries, and or is changing country every year, and they still guarantee holding that position for you just because you're following your spouse somewhere. So, I mean, this is the kind of privilege, which means that the debate between working or not working or staying at home, we don't feel, that sort of Damocles sword of having to go back to work absolutely because, we're going to lose something. Okay, so that's something that is interesting. Of course, again, as I say, profession libérale, if you're self-employed, that doesn't apply to you. Because a bit like a realtor here, you're making your own business, your own income, and so if you don't work, no income. Of course, if you are working like me, and if you do take this pre and post natal compulsory leave, you can go back to work when the baby is 3 months because the state helps you, because there are all of these subsidized or sometimes even free daycare system, childcare, from the moment your child is 3 months old. Now that is some kind of a gift, right? And so if you want to have a career and you still want to have a child, you can, because you know that there's somebody who's going to take care. And in general, believe me, of course there are private daycare in France also, but there are public daycare. Of course you want a child in a public daycare. Why is that? Because those people are really qualified, they're certified, they have to take all of those licenses. While the private daycare would be about the same problem as in the US. Sometimes you don't know whom is actually keeping your baby. So there are ways. I mean, in Paris, in some areas of Paris, people sign up for the wait list for the daycare, for the crèche, as we say, while they're pregnant. Okay, because in some arrondissements in Paris, there's a wait list. In some others, not. Me, I come from the province, from Toulouse, and so no wait list. So that's the advantage as well of not living in Paris. And then, of course, when your child is 3 years old, this time, he goes to school. He goes to public school. What you call here in the States preschool, for before K, this is already school. This is petite section, moyenne section, and then K is grande section of the maternelle, of the maternal school, and this is free. Of course, you can choose to put your child in a private school and pay. But you have a very decent, extremely well thought of, and one of the best system of maternal schools in the world are in France. And so you don't have to pay, so you can go back to work full time if you want to when your child is 3 years old. And so some women, can decide when the child is 3 months old, for instance, okay, I'll go back to work part-time because I still want to be with my baby and that's how I feel, etc. Or I can go back to work full-time. So if I give you some more numbers, part-time, 71% of the women who are working in France are full-time. 71%. And that's because of this system where you have all this daycare system. 17% of women are part-time. Now, for all of the part-time women, 70 this time chose to become part-time. They deliberately decided, I want to have a work-life balance. I want to give as much time to my family and my work. This is who I am, and that's what they do. Now, about 30% are forced to do so because of circumstances. Now, 83% of women in France who have a child who is less than 3 years old are working or looking for a job, which means they're not exactly in a position of, they're not telling, it's not 83% who choose to stay at home. It's 83% of women in France who have a child less than 3 years old who work or who are looking for a job. If you have 2 kids, it's about 63%, and if you have 3, it's about 38%. Now, on New Year's Eve, I was invited as one of my husband's colleagues, and there was a young American woman, one of the wife of my husband's colleagues. She was pregnant, and she's due to give